A big greeting to everyone. Welcome once again to the lectures of this self-knowledge course. In the conference that we will study today, we will review some of the aspects that could be preventing us from having positive results in the different practices related to self-knowledge, as this is a totally practical path. In these conferences we receive the theoretical part of the practices. But if we want to experience advances in our personal and internal esoteric path, we must practice with perseverance and discipline. The fundamental thing, beyond intellectually understanding the theoretical aspects of this path, is learning to achieve the practices. And why is this so important? We can study in these conferences about the purpose of our existence on this planet, about the number of cycles that are given to us as opportunities to achieve self-realization, about the passage through the different kingdoms of nature, the number of existences with a human physical body for each cycle, the processes of physical death, evolution, and involution, etc. But if we don't corroborate that information for ourselves through astral projection or transcendental meditation, this will only remain a worthless concept in our minds. On the other hand, if we achieve these practices and begin to connect with our inner being, and this allows us to verify these things and corroborate these things, then we begin to become aware of the meaning of this existence, beyond any concept that exists. Then the knowledge will become a truth in us. In the same way, here we can learn, and we have talked a lot, about our psychology and about how our psychological defects have trapped our consciousness and constantly lead us to make mistakes, to live a recurring destiny, and to generate karma. But if we don't do our practices of psychological death from moment to moment, of watching and praying, and of reflective meditation, that will remain only a theory. And the theory will never be able to get us out of the psychological confinement in which we find ourselves thanks to our ego. Only constant practice can achieve this. The same can be said about the practice of suprasex. We could reflect and become somewhat aware of the value of our energy and the need to create ourselves internally. But if we don't constantly do the practice of suprasex, nor do we do the work to purify that practice so as not to have sexual falls, this, develop the power of always make our sexual energy ascend through our spine in sexual practice with our partner. Well, if we don't do so, we will simply have very valuable information in our minds, which is of no use to us, because we don't put it into practice. So, as we can see, what is really important is not just practicing, but practicing with diligence and perseverance until you begin to be successful in each of the practices. All the practices that we have taught since the beginning of the course, and those that we will teach in the future, give positive results. Therefore, if we are stuck in achieving any of the practices, the important thing is to review what aspects are preventing us from achieving it. Today we are going to review the 4 aspects that most commonly lead us to failure in practices, so that we can see which of them are making us stumble, and we can correct it, to begin to have positive results in the practices we carry out. The first aspect of failure in practice is lack of concentration. We are concentrated when consciousness is focused on action. If our consciousness is our particular God, he never fails. So, if we focus our consciousness on what we are doing, and do not get distracted, this certainly has great power. But the most common cause of not achieving a good result when performing a practice is the lack of concentration we have, the ease with which we get distracted by anything we see, or by the thoughts in our mind. In Conference 21, where we talked about concentration and relaxation, we gave many guidelines on how to learn to concentrate at all times, since to develop concentration, we must make the effort to be present, alert, and focused at all times. We must make the effort to be fully concentrated in everything we are doing, since it must be our consciousness who does each of the activities of our daily life. So as not to continue doing them mechanically, while we fantasize in our mind with all the projections of the ego, or doing 1,000 things at once, without really paying attention to any of them. In other words, we cannot wait for the moment in which we are going to do an esoteric practice to learn to concentrate, but learning to concentrate is an exercise that must be done at all times. And that gives incredible results, since concentration is the power that allows us to succeed in anything we undertake. So how are we going to achieve concentration? Before any activity we are going to do, the first thing is to set our goal in our heart. Having clear in our mind what we are going to do, and what we want to achieve by doing it. In this way, we will enter into doing that activity in a state of awareness of our objective. The second step will always be to put courage into what we are going to do. Whenever we have the encouragement to do something, we do it, but if we don't have the encouragement, it is difficult to move the will. Once we set the mood, we start doing. Now, what are we going to do with all the thoughts and emotions that are going to start appearing as soon as we try to stay focused on something? We are going to eliminate them with the request to our Divine Mother. And every time we eliminate any detail, thought, emotion, desire, tension, etc., we return to our heart to remain focused on our goal. Every time something comes to our mind to distract us, we eliminate it and return to what we are doing. That way we will stay focused until we successfully finish what we are doing. So, it is necessary to understand how important it is to carry out each activity we do during the day in a concentrated way, in order to be able to exercise, and thus develop, the ability to stay focused when carrying out a practice. We will see that for this purpose, it is very useful for us to always prepare a schedule of the activities that we must carry out throughout the day. Having that organization will make it easier for us to dedicate ourselves to doing each thing with concentration, without getting distracted by thinking about the other things we have to do, and without having to plan them while we do something else. In addition, having an order will allow us to get more out of our time. Something that is highly recommended is that when we make our agenda for the day, we first assign the schedules to the different esoteric practices that we will do during the day, so that personality things do not occupy us all the time. Let's also remember from the 21st conference, certain aspects that are important to take into account in order to concentrate. The first of them is, always make an effort to do one thing at a time. Not thinking about anything else while you are carrying out that activity, but rather keeping your mental energy focused on the task at hand. Without interrupting what you are doing to start doing something else, but always trying to finish what you are doing before dedicating yourself to the next activity. Nor should you start thinking about the things we must do later, as that would take us out of the present moment and out of the state of alert and concentration. Nor remembering the things that have already been done, as this would also take us out of concentration and the present moment, unnecessarily taking us to the past. The key is to stay focused on what we are doing. This way we will achieve concentration during the practices we do, and during anything we undertake during the day. Let's now review the second aspect that causes us to fail in practices. That second aspect is the lack of faith. If we are full of doubts about something, we will hardly have the right disposition to do it. Hence, to carry out any practice, we must transcend the skepticism and confusion that all the concepts we may have in relation to the practice put us in. This, so that we can encourage ourselves to do the practice, verify it, and thus develop a conscious faith. It is important to clarify that when we talk about conscious faith, we are differentiating it from blind faith, which is simply believing in something just because someone said it, or because everyone believes it. Conscious faith is that which is obtained as a result of direct experimentation and verification. And the opposite of faith is doubt. Doubt is truly our worst enemy, since when it appears, we fail, because it always convinces us not to do anything. We must be clear that doubt will only seek to prevent us from seeing results. It takes our encouragement away, and keeps us doubting in our minds whether we should do it or not, until it ends up convincing us not to do it. Therefore, the only way to develop and nourish faith is to put aside the mind and start doing. A person who has already done something, already knows it. And if you already know it, you no longer doubt it. So, if we have doubts about whether it is possible to astral project, or if we will be able to perform a transcendental meditation, or if we will be able to teach, or if it is really possible to transmute sexual energy in the suprasex practice, etc. As long as we continue to have doubts, we will never really know. But if we overcome the state of doubt, if we eliminate all those concepts from our mind, achieving inner silence, and put the right mood, and do the practice, then we will achieve it, and that will give us conscious faith in the practice. Once we manage to consciously unfold ourselves to the astral plane, and see ourselves moving at will in the fifth dimension, floating or flying at will with our molecular body, then there will already be a conscious faith in that practice. We will have already overcome ignorance and doubt, and we will have achieved faith. So, the important thing here is to be clear that faith is nourished by works. Let's now look at the third aspect that leads us to failure in practices. This third aspect is fear. That's another thing that prevents us from doing. Fear makes everyone incompetent and helpless. When someone is afraid, don't act. The force of fear is opposite to the force of love, and love is in our actions. Let's take an example. Let's imagine a building that is close to where we are, and to it we connect a tempered steel platform about 6 inches from the ground, from where we are to there. Then we added some handrails to that platform, so everything is safe and secure. From there, 15 centimeters above the ground, on a well-tempered steel platform, each of you will go, holding onto the handrails, walking on the carpet. Do any of you imagine that you couldn't walk there? Everyone thinks they can, right? Well, let's now imagine the same scenario, but 400 feet above the ground. We will place the same steel platform with the carpet and handrails. And then we ask you to walk around. Would you go? Hardly any of you will cross. Why? Because fear immediately entered our imagination. And as long as we do not resolve our fears, if we identify with our imagination, our willpower will never be put into action. Fear is fed through mechanical imagination. And if our fear is not resolved, as long as the imagination is not resolved, the will not work. If we don't overcome our fears, we will not be able to consciously astral project, we will not be able to meditate, we will not be able to transmute our sexual energy, etc. And this because we have lost willpower, which is what allows us to do anything. So, what should we do to overcome fear? We must observe, understand, and eliminate all the details of fear that prevent us from doing. We must also observe who is behind the mechanical imagination. Once we discover what the psychological defect is that is projecting in our imagination all kinds of terrifying scenarios that we think could happen. And we dismantle all of its concepts through psychological death, and we eliminate all the details of that defect in our emotion. And we also look on an instinctive level at everything that it makes us feel on the skin, and throughout the body, and we eliminate it. Then we will free ourselves from fear, and we will have the right encouragement to start doing and succeed. Let's now look at the fourth aspect that leads us to failure in practices. This fourth aspect is the objective. Having a lack of objective, or having a wrong objective. Why is it important to have an objective? Well, it is because when we have a clear and well-defined objective, it is easier for us to focus all our efforts on achieving it. But when we don't have a defined objective, or it is a very vague objective, then we will remain wandering without achieving a successful result. I can show you this with an example. If a ship leaves a port with a clear and defined destination, it is very likely that it will reach its destination. But now imagine a ship packed with all the necessary provisions, the crew and everything ready. And the crew asks the captain, "Shall we set sail now?" And the captain answers, "Yes." And then they ask the captain, "In what direction?" And the captain says, I don't know yet." So, what would happen? The crew would start saying, "Let's go to Paris." "No, better towards Germany," others would say. Another would say, "No, we better go to New York. And just like that, the entire crew would start arguing and fighting, and they wouldn't end up going anywhere. Because there was no established objective. The same when we are doing a practice. We must have a clear objective, and it must be something that we really want to achieve or investigate, so that the desire to achieve that objective serves as an impetus to achieve the practice. And so that once we are successful in the practice, we have a clear direction of where to go. For example, if we are going to practice astral projection, we must always have a clear and defined objective that we really want to achieve. Be it going to the karma court, investigating a recurrence, or a past life. It could also be talking to a specific master, deepen our study on a certain psychological defect, or any other objective that you find important. We need to have a defined direction, a course of action. To do this, before carrying out the practice, we need to define. Which is my objective? For example, if you are going to practice astral projection, ask yourself, what is the objective I will pursue once I am conscious on the astral plane? And once you set a goal, you must reflect on whether that is a goal that you really want to achieve. If, for example, we define that we consciously want to go to the astral plane to meet with a master, you must reflect. What is the reason why I seek to speak with that master? You need to be aware of what you are going to ask him. You cannot introduce yourself and simply say, "Hello, master. How are you doing? What's new?" Just as we do on the physical plane when we meet with others. We must always have a defined and well-established objective in advance. And make it a goal that we really want to achieve. Because the greater the desire we have to achieve that goal, the greater the spirit we will put into carrying out the practice. And definitely, having the right frame of mind is very important to be successful. It is important that you study which of these 4 points are making you fail. Do you lack concentration? Do you have faith, or is doubt prevent you from doing? If you find any fear, you must beg your Divine Mother to eliminate it. And finally, have a clear objective. With this you should no longer fail. Now to finish today's topic, I would like to let you know that there are 4 rules that every student of esotericism must know. Knowing how to long, knowing how to dare, knowing how to do, and knowing how to keep silent. What does it mean to know how to long? Desiring is longing, desire is the source of all strength. What does it mean to know how to dare? Daring is to start doing, take action, try something, dare to do it. What is knowing how to do? It is putting the will and starting to do. You will see that one is the one who puts the will to start doing, but the one who does it is the being. So, if we put the right will, we will triumph, because the being always triumphs in what it does. And why is it important to know how to keep silent? Because we should never talk about what we experience in other dimensions. In this way, we gain the trust of our being, and we get the right that our being continues to allow us to investigate more and more things, and more deeply. And well, this has been the topic that we have brought to you today. Hope will be helpful. I invite you to the next topic, where we will learn how to control nocturnal emissions and sexual falls. In that conference, we will study what psychological aspects lead us to losing our sexual energy, as well as the attacks that we can receive from the Black Lodge in order to steal our sexual energy. There we will study all related to the sleep paralysis, and the attacks from witches and black magicians through the 4th dimension and during dreams. Also, we will study certain external aspects that can also prevent us from achieving perfect chastity. Thank you very much for attending this topic. Until next time.